Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lucy. I'm with the Ann Arbor District Library, and I am really excited to be here with Sheela Lal, who is the founder of the Unerased Book Club, and Fatema Haque, who is the founding board member and the president of Rising Voices of Asian American Families. And they are joining me today to talk a little bit about the Unerased Book Club, and then how it came to exist under the umbrella of Rising Voices of Asian American Families. So thank you both so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. And I wonder if we could just start off by telling our viewers what the Unerased Book Club is.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the Ann Arbor District Library for having us. My name's Sheela, and I can go ahead and give a stab at this. The Unerased Book Club is a book club that reads exclusively Asian American authors. And when I started this in 2018, I saw that there were no sustained book clubs focusing on the Pan-Asian American community and its diversity. And the book club is actually modeled off of Well-Read Black Girl, and I took that model and adopted a hyper-local ethos by encouraging readers to engage with each other in their larger communities. And last year, we adopted it into a virtual book club.
And how did you come up with the name Unerased Book Club?
Yeah, so I went to business school at the University of Michigan, and that's actually how I became familiar with the Ann Arbor system, the public library system. And one of the things that I took from business school was a brand or a title should really get at the heart of its purpose and not leave its potential consumers, or in this case, readers, questioning what it's about. And so Asian American authors, stories, histories, and lives have always been erased and banished from history and our collective zeitgeist. So I wanted a book club to address this type of systemic racism in a small way, and that is by unerasing our value.
Okay. And then this book club shifted to be part of Rising Voices of Asian American Families. So I wondered, firstly, Fatema, if you wanted to talk a little bit about what Rising Voices of Asian American Families is, and then how both of you decided that the book club would become part of that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Fatema, and I got involved with Rising Voices in 2019, which is when it was also founded and started by a group of Asian American women. Rising Voices seeks to increase the civic participation of Asian Americans in Michigan. We recognized that there was a gap in organizing for Asian American women, particularly, and young people specifically, and we wanted to center their roles and service to the community and their needs as well, because we believe that they hold vitally important perspectives. And so we are an organization that's very relational. We try to do both social activities as well as political and civic engagement activities. So last year we focused on the census, on the elections, obviously, as well as offering mutual aid support for low-income Asian American families in Southeast Michigan. And in terms of Unerased Book Club coming into it, I mean, I think it's a lot about what Sheela has done. She started the group and recognizing that there was a congruence between the community building aspect that we were trying to do with Rising Voices and what Unerased is also trying to do. Pre-pandemic, Unerased also offered options to meet up in person to do these book clubs locally within your area. So Sheela would connect people within the same region together and let them know, hey, you live in the same area, you're reading the same book, go meet up and kind of have your little pod. So we just thought it was such a phenomenal model to fit into Rising Voices and help grow connections between Asian American folks in Michigan or nationally.
I love the idea of like a book club as a natural community builder, and I think it really can be. And I think like right now your website is also set up really well for that, because anybody can access it, and then you're building a community there, especially in the time right now where community is a little bit more difficult maybe to to find. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how, like this past year, how your book club has adapted this past year, or even how the activities at Rising Voices have had to adapt and change.
Yeah, so I can talk about the way that the book club has adapted, and then I would love for Fatema to talk about the ways that Rising Voices has adapted, because it's been really incredible to watch. So I started this book club the summer between my 2 years at Ross, which is the business school, and wanted to continue maintaining it. Saw that like between full-time school and then eventually full-time work, it was really difficult for me to do that, especially with the, like Fatima mentioned, the initial organizing of it, which was to encourage people to meet up locally. And so when the pandemic really struck the US, I realized that there was no harm in trying to hold a conversation virtually with friends or strangers, especially as we were all trying to figure out what socializing meant virtually. And this was actually, it turned out to be a much more successful medium because folks felt more comfortable coming online as opposed to going maybe to a coffee shop before the pandemic hit, or going to another common place to meet strangers in person. And all of last year, we kept a steady flow of about 15 participants per book club meeting. And this year, we've grown almost 200% to about a 25 steady participant flow. And that's also when I asked Fatima to formally join as the co-facilitator. And so we have extra bandwidth. We're able to do and to think about things like author outreach, talking to you, talking to other libraries, doing some social media presence and engagement, and also trying to understand how can we convert the 250 plus large listserv that we have from just receiving emails to joining calls. And we recognize that, like everything community oriented, it will take time, and we have to show that it is the proof of concept and that it's safe. And we also recognize, like you said, Lucy, that because it is designed for anybody to do, people may be reading the books and we just don't know, and that's okay too, because all, like, my end goal with this is to get more people reading Asian American authors.
And I can speak to how Rising Voices has shifted its activities to the virtual format. Pre-pandemic, we really had gained momentum in terms of organizing in people's homes, right? Recognizing that a lot of Asian American women, they have their own social networks and groups and may not often engage in public spaces, but I'm speaking specifically to the Bangladeshi American community in Michigan, may not uh, engage in public spaces, but do host people at home and do have social circles at home. And we wanted to reach them where they were at. And so we were hosting these community potlucks in people's homes. They would invite their friends, and we would be able to reach a group of folks that we typically wouldn't be able to reach because they weren't coming to, organizing meetings or civic engagement education events or things like that. So we were going to where they were. So we kept trying to recreate that in a virtual format, and we hosted storytelling events, we hosted speakers. We also hosted virtual like cooking sessions and social activities to kind of get people. So for example, for Lunar New Year, we had a dumpling making party, and we had really great reception with everyone. Like people would join with their children and, like engage with us. And it's been really, really phenomenal. And a lot of our organizing activities also went virtual. So we started with mailers, especially when the pandemic first hit. We did a round of wellness checks with our Asian Michiganders, and we reached hundreds of people that way, and just being able to check in on them and say, hey, what's going on? What support do you need? And if needed, we also connected them to our mutual aid fund during the pandemic.
That's great. It's interesting. This has been an interesting time in that I think people have had to adjust and try to connect virtually. But I like in what both of you are saying, I see ways that you have been able to connect with communities that maybe you wouldn't have connected with before. And so I think that that's interesting that you've been able to grow in that way, in a sense. I want to get back to one thing you were saying, Sheela, about like that anyone can, how many people are signing up, but beyond that, anybody can go on your website and read the books. And you do have these really great discussion questions there, so that even if you're just reading it alone in your home, you have something to think about. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you select the titles for your book club. It's such a wide variety of genres, and that's really interesting. So,
Yeah. So when you sent over these prep questions, I was thinking about the best way to frame it. So I took a pricing class in business school and learned about something called orthogonal design, which basically means designing experiments with the aim to have the smallest manageable combination of potential profiles. And so I took that idea and actively applied it to designing the types of books I would love other people to read. And so in this case, the combination profiles have two parameters, ethnicity and genre. I wanted as little overlap between the choices among these parameters as possible to create the widest net to reach potential readers. So this means if I've read a bunch of books by Chinese American authors, I need to actually read more books by other types of Asian Americans. Or if I'm reading a lot of poems, I need to actually read other types of genres in order to create this really wide net along the orthogonal design mindset. So this pushes me to read outside of my comfort zone as well. I've actually been pushed to read young adult, which I didn't realize I would enjoy until I started doing this type of research, to read poetry, which I'm not very good at, but again, helps me think more critically about how we discuss experiences through literature, and also to be more open-minded about what a piece of art can push us to reconsider about what being Asian American means.
I definitely see that across the genres you picked. I mean, you even look at this, your picks so far for 2021, and it's you have a collection of essays, you have a young adult book, you have this graphic novel that's sort of like a political horror, which I loved. I had never read anything like that. So I just I like hearing how you came to that with this very formulaic almost thought process, but it's just really translated well. And then coming up with the questions for these books, and maybe you both could speak to this because you both facilitate these discussions, but I was impressed how the questions go beyond plot and theme and motif, and you really kind of delve into some personal thinking that people would have to do and reflect. So how do you come up with the questions that you're going to pair with?
This is a real work in progress. So the first few years that I was writing questions, it was about theme, plot, and motif. And then as we started having real conversations with the virtual format, I really quickly recognized that about 20% of the time is spent on the book and 80% is drawn from personal reflections. And that allowed me to retool the way that I write guiding questions and help prime people to think about things before they show up. But the fact that we spend 80% on personal reflection showed me a few things. One, that the book club space has become safe enough for folks to feel comfortable sharing vulnerable and personal stories. Also, that there aren't nearly enough opportunities for Asian Americans to feel seen, whether that's within their own friend groups or their work lives or other spaces, because a lot of stories that we hear are very personal. And we've heard a few times that this was the first time they'd shared it in this type of forum. And then when you know that you can talk about the ways literature triggers memories or experiences, you become more invested in reading the next book. And that's how we've seen folks remain in the book club and come back time and time again, is because they're looking forward to finding other ways to express their memories as valid, as opposed to maybe just something that happened to them once and not part of a larger narrative. And then again, because we're a Pan-Asian American group, it's been so rewarding to recognize how many of us share common experiences with slight variations. And I know that I leave every book club call significantly more enriched because I've broken metaphorically emotional bread with other Asian Americans reading the same book.
And if I could add to that, I think that Sheela and I are close friends outside of the book club too, and are organizing work. And these are questions that we generally have as we're reading, as we're conversing or trying to think about what books should be or should not be included. And these conversations help us deepen our friendships. And so I think it kind of goes back into the book club format. And I'll echo this piece about how so often we Asian Americans don't see ourselves reflected in the media and in the literature that gets, turned into films or whatever else, So it's very important to be able to have the space to digest the messaging or the content and to be able to relate and reflect. It's not happening in our classrooms in like college or in high school or anything. It's not, unless you're intentionally going out and seeking out those stories, it's not happening necessarily at work where we're surrounded by people who don't necessarily look like us, or we are one of the few who might be Asian Americans within a certain unit or department. And sometimes it may not even happen within our community or neighborhood because, again, we are like singularly, a lot of people who come in, they say that, oh, I've actually never been in a space with all Asian Americans or majority Asian Americans. So to be able to see that and to have other people to kind of connect to and talk to across Pan-Asian identities, that's been very enriching. And people naturally lean towards sharing personal experiences and talking about, oh, I know exactly what this is, but this is how it shows up for me in my context.
Yeah, it's like the books are just the door, and yeah. You guys are just providing that door and opening it, and then people come in. I just think that's, I know, I love that. And like being an enthusiastic reader, also, I just like the idea of books as being the start of a connection, but then it's just so much more. So that's really.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to quickly say, like, so my mom is part of other book clubs, which have stalled or like had logistics issues because of COVID. And so she's joined this too. And like, my mom is one of those parents that actively signs up for all the stuff I'm doing just to see, but never really participates because she's like, it's not for me or whatnot. But she's in the past 2-3 months since January. And I think that says a lot about like what Fatema said, like being able to share and like be seen, even though like she's 30 years older than most people in the club. And we have we do have a range of folks who come in terms of age, but being able to like have perspective, have differences of opinion, but everyone valuing having a book that pushes them to think a little bit more about who they are is really, really cool. And like, I like that my mom comes to them. She doesn't have to, she's proven she doesn't have to come to them. Because and she chooses to because she sees like that humanity in it instead of just talking about the book.
That's really great. Do you either of you have some favorite titles or some standout titles that you can think of that either facilitated a discussion that you didn't expect or a discussion that was really meaningful? Or
that's a good question.
And I don't want to put you on the spot because there's like a lot of titles now there that you have chosen. So
I can share one that stood out to me because this is not a genre I would lean towards or read myself. And we read in February of this year, IQ by Joe Ide. Joe Ide. And it's a detective novel kind of set up in the same Sherlock Holmes style. Not something I would naturally lean toward or read at all. And it also triggered certain feelings of who has the right to tell what story. And so the conversation was very rich because the author chooses to write primarily Black American characters in the story and center the story around that. So there are very few actual Asian people in the book. And it was just fascinating to have that experience and have that conversation and everybody just going oh, this is such an atypical read.
I would say my two most thought-provoking conversations were last year. One was with the first book in March, which is The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And at that point, this was my third time reading the book. And I absolutely loved hearing from everyone else how this idea of gathering, which is very much a physical experience, has now been moved online. And we got into a really deep discussion of what does ritual mean, especially around death and mourning, because we had seen such aggressive spikes in the death rate at that point in time. And it was so harrowing to experience. And then when we all came together to talk about what does it look like in our own cultures or in our own families, I felt like a profound sense of relief in a very odd way. But then my second favorite conversation was in September for the book of poems called Dhaka Dust by a Bangladeshi American poet. And it was my favorite because it was one of my favorites because we actually talked about the meat of poetry. And because we so rarely do that, we talk a lot about experiences. It was truly like enriching to hear that like technical side of poetry. And also it was one of my favorite like experiences with Fatema because like to see her shine and talk about like the technical aspects of writing, having lived in Bangladesh for a lot of her life and being able to like do a compare and contrast and help like massage out like the differences between being so far removed as part of the diaspora and having access to that information. I don't know, like I still think about that set of poetry, and I have bought more poetry with the intent of reading it as closely as we did for that book club.
And I'll also say the art of gathering, I now use it in my work all the time. I referenced it. I've had some of my students, and I teach undergrads. I've had some of them read parts of it, and it's just, I've brought it into my work, which I love anytime I get to do that with, you know, books that I'm reading for fun and end up being very, very practical and useful.
Yeah, it's great to see what reading can mean to different people, or how even for yourself, something that you've read before evolves and changes in its usefulness to you or in the connections that you make through it. So that's really neat. Is there anything that you were hoping that I would get to, that I would ask you that we haven't covered? Or I just always want to make sure that I'm touching on it all.
In terms of logistics, I do really want to highlight that while we read Asian American authors and a strong majority of the people who show up to the book club meetings are Asian American, the book club is very much for anybody. Like, we want to hear from different point of views. We want to hear from people who who've been reading Asian American authors for a long time, people who've never read them, people who who are learning about what it means to build like the like frameworks for understanding Asian American history and experiences. Like, we want anybody and everyone to be a part of the book club in any capacity that makes sense, whether that just means receiving emails, whether it means reading the books on your own time, whether it means joining us or having your own friends read them. Like, I don't care how it's done. I just want to see more people supporting Asian American authors and reminding people in their lives that we are very valid and that our writing is really, really good. And that our contributions to American culture and society should be highly visible too.
And I'll also add that I don't think Sheela mentioned this when she talked about how the books are selected. They're really chosen to be as accessible as possible. So we check to see, you know, are they available in libraries? Are they available, you know, in different formats? And so how easy is it for you to acquire this book?
Those are both very important points that you both just made, how to get the book and who you're trying to reach, that like that broad outreach. So thank you for mentioning both of those points. And thank you for joining me today and talking about the Unerased Book Club and Rising Voices of Asian American Families. It's been really great to chat with you. So thanks.
Thank you so much.